those are our picks against the spread for week 8. And now we are going to go to John's segment where he's going to take the wheel here for the fantasy week 8 starts and sits.
Yeah, so the starts and sits, I say this every week, but I'm not going to tell you to start Derrick Henry. I'm not going to tell you to sit Derrick Henry. Guys like that, they're studs. They should be in your lineup anyway. And then obviously, if there's really deep, bench guys, those are the guys that you don't want to be playing anyway either. So first off, to start, we're going to go with the quarterbacks. And we're going to say Mr. Kirk Cousins is a start. I know we just talked about them and his whole primetime record. But the Dallas defense does give a lot of explosive plays up, and they're not amazing against the pass. So even if there's some turnovers in this game, Kirk Cousins, that offense should be firing on those cylinders. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen are, absolute threats. And so I think one of them is going to be able to take advantage of Anthony Brown on one side, and the other one, even against Trayvon Diggs, who's been having a good year interception wise, he still gives up yards. So yeah, I would say start Kirk Cousins. The next quarterback, Carson Wentz from the Indianapolis Colts. He's been having a good year so far. He's finally really picked it up in this offense. I think that things are just starting to click for them. Jonathan Taylor's looked amazing. And I think against the Titans, this game could turn into a shootout because we know the Titans offense is capable of. And so that could, spur Carson Wentz into even more action offensively to try and keep up if that happens. If not, I still expect the Colts to have success because the Titans defense, although they've been, I would say, overperforming against some of the recent teams, they're still not amazing talent-wise, especially in the back half with all the injuries. At running back, Elijah Mitchell from the 49ers. They play Chicago, so, some people are like, oh, that's a little bit scary. Khalil Mack probably isn't going to play in this game, so you don't have to deal with him. And although they have some talent amongst the rest of the front seven, Elijah Mitchell has just been solid, and the 49ers rushing attack is very different than most teams in the league. The zone read scheme that they do, it can get anybody going, and it worked last week against the Colts, and so I don't think anything should change. Start him if he is playing. I believe he is. And the other running back in that same game, other side of the ball, Khalil Herbert from the Chicago Bears. He ran for over 100 yards against Tampa Bay last week, so what more can you say? They're not really doing much in the passing game, and so I'd expect them to rely on the run again. And Khalil Herbert has been fantastic ever since he has gotten touches because of the injury to David Montgomery. So start Khalil Herbert. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. At wide receiver, T. Higgins from the Cincinnati Bengals. They play the Jets, so that's enough said. Also, I think last week he had 14 or 15 targets. So yes, Jamar Chase did have the big week, but T. Higgins was getting most of the targets. Now, some of them were uncatchable. He only, I think, had 7 catches, only 7. That's still great production. If that's full PPR, that's 7 points just right there. And so imagine if he was getting, a lot of catchable targets, that could have been a monster game in his own right. So I would say start T. Higgins this one because he's getting a lot of targets, especially in the red zone. Jamar Chase is less of a factor in the red zone. He's, their big play guy, but when they get down there, T. Higgins seems to be the one that's targeted the most, along with CJ Uzomah. So start T. Higgins. The next wide receiver, Emmanuel Sanders from the Buffalo Bills. They've just been firing on all cylinders. They're looking really good. Stephon Diggs hasn't had, an amazing year. It's still solid, but it's not what we expected of him after last year. And that's opened the door for Emmanuel Sanders to come in and be, honestly, a really good option for them. And they're playing Miami, who last time they played, they beat them 35-0. So there should be a lot of scoring opportunities here. Secondary still banged up. Who knows what's going to happen with the trade deadline and Xavier Howard. And, he's always in the news when it comes to potential trades. So start Emmanuel Sanders. And the final wide receiver, Michael Pittman Jr. If you're going to start Carson Wentz, well, you probably got to start one of his options at receiver. Michael Pittman is that guy. He's become the clear alpha in this Colts passing attack, and he's been doing really well against the Titans. Last time they played, I think he had a massive play that was called back, and so he was really one flag away from having a really big day. He still managed to put up double digits against them, but he's finding his stride, so start Michael Pittman Jr. And finally, at tight end, Hunter Henry from the New England Patriots. They play the Chargers, who've given up the second most points in the league so far to opposing tight ends in fantasy. And so That's someone that you want to start. They play a defense where they sit back deep. They don't want to let you beat them over the top. And Hunter Henry, he's been a really solid red zone target for Mac Jones so far too. So at worst, I think he can get you a touchdown in this one. So start Hunter Henry. Got any thoughts on any of those starts?
I forgot. I can't believe I forgot. Hunter Henry revenge game, like
Yeah,
against the Titans.
that too.
I mean, Kirk Cousins at this point, like he's he's been a consistent top 10 fantasy guy since he's pretty much. I know like the past few years. I know this series still is. So, yeah, if you don't have Kirk Cousins in your league, just scoop him up. Like I know it's not the sexiest play, sexiest name, but he produces for fantasy purposes. You know, it's. I wish. Trust me, I wish I had him in my two quarterback league. I don't. So, I had to use Carson Wentz last week. He was still solid for me. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell and Khalil Herbert's been pretty good actually. So yeah, I do endorse that, and obviously Michael Pittman. I think I have him in one of my leagues, but I have better receivers now. So, but if I didn't, I think last week when I had a bunch of guys off, he definitely made the start. So, and then who was the other receiver? I'm missing a receiver, or he was the only receiver.
T. Higgins, Emmanuel
Oh,
Sanders,
yeah.
Mike
T. Higgins,
Pittman.
like you want as much of that Cincinnati pass game like that. Cincinnati
Yeah,
pass game's doing so well. I think Boyd's really. I've had to say Boyd kind of feels like the third fiddle. I'm not sure that's
yeah,
the numbers back that up, but just when I watch the
they
games,
do.
he kind of is a third fiddle, but he's still a pretty good third fiddle.
Yeah.
And Teagan's been pretty good number two option, like John had mentioned. So, yeah, I fully endorse us, if not all, then most of them. So yeah,
Yep. All right. So moving on to the sits. First off, at quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. He's been having a good couple of weeks, but they play Buffalo, and that scares me. Buffalo's defense has just been really good this year. Gregory Russo getting a lot of pressure, and just overall Tre'Davious White, he's solid. He can take away somebody. Their safeties are obviously really good. So there's just a lot that Buffalo has to offer defensively. And once again, the last time they played, it was 35-0. Don't really want to mess with that. At the next quarterback, Jameis Winston from the Saints. They played Tampa Bay, and that's just a tough spot to be in with the receiving options they have. Michael Thomas still isn't back to my knowledge. I mean, he's obviously eligible to return, but I don't think he's going to play this week. And so you're looking at Marquez Callaway still, Deontay Harris.
little
Man,
Jordan
I'm trying to
Humphrey.
think. Little Jordan Humphrey, Traquan Smith came back last week, but
Sorry,
even
I just love little Jordan Humphrey's name. I'm sorry.
yeah, UT guy from Texas.
I didn't know that.
Anyway, Traquan Smith, he came back last week, and so that was good. But even he and Jameis, they got into an argument last week on the sideline that looked pretty heated. I don't know what was going on there. I'm not trusting Jameis against Tampa Bay's defense. That's going to be tough, especially with the way that Alvin Kamara's been playing. If anything, they're going to rely on him. So I would sit Jameis Winston at running back. Mike Davis from the Atlanta Falcons. This is not a matchup based one. It's a Cordero Patterson one. Cordero Patterson is slowly taking over this job more and more every single week, getting more involved, more snaps, more touches. And Mike Davis is becoming an afterthought. At this point, I would say bench him until he proves that he deserves to be in your starting lineup. He was
Or if
drafted.
Cordero, God forbid, gets hurt.
Yeah, if Cordero does get hurt, then Mike Davis gets right back in there. But Mike Davis he was drafted to be a starting running back in fantasy teams, and Cordero Patterson has really stolen all of that value. So sit Mike Davis. Next running back, Michael Carter from the New York Jets. I know that Mike White did throw a lot of passes to running backs last week, but you need to factor in that Ty Johnson, who's typically involved in passing game work, had a concussion. So he was out for, I think, the second half of last week. Looks like he's good to go this week, so that's going to take away work from him. And also, I mean, the Jets, you don't really want to be investing in that offense that much, especially when, they're playing Cincinnati, whose defense has been a lot better than most people expected this year. So I would say sit Michael Carter if you're desperate. You can throw him in there, but it's tough to justify starting really anybody in the Jets offense right now. At wide receiver, actually all three of these guys have been on the sits pretty frequently. First off, Robbie Anderson, he's getting a lot of work and he's not turning it into anything. A lot of targets. I think over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, he has 100 yards total. That's just not good enough production. He's a sit until he can prove that he deserves to be in your lineups as well. Next to receiver, Tyler Lockett. the Geno Smith factor has just sort of eliminated Tyler Lockett's value for the most part. Be patient with him if you're a fantasy owner. Don't trade him. Don't panic. God forbid, don't cut him. Because Russell Wilson will come back week 10, and we know that Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett have a special connection. So just sit him until then, because Geno Smith, it doesn't really look like him and Tyler Lockett are able to connect very well. And finally, Allen Robinson. I thought last week was going to be the breakout week for Allen Robinson, that Justin Fields would rely on him because he's more talented, and Tampa's going to send a lot of pressure his way. So maybe he just chuck it up Allen Robinson's way. There's a play in that game where Allen Robinson was like booty naked open down the middle, and Justin Fields wasn't able to hit him because he was under siege. So it's just not working out for Allen Robinson at this point. There's no production. Same with Tyler Lockett. Don't panic if you're a fantasy owner, because the trade deadline is next week. I would at least hold him for another week, because if he does get traded to another team, that would drastically change his value. But as of right now, the Bears are one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And from a fantasy perspective, in the passing game might be the worst. So I would not be starting Allen Robinson moving forward. And at tight end, we're going to say sit Jared Cook from the Chargers. They're playing the Patriots. It's always tough to deal with New England and what they scheme up, especially in the red zone. Bill Belichick has a lot, for opposing teams in the red zone. It's just overall the Patriots are good at taking away certain things that can help you win in small ways. And so I would say, sure, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are going to be go options because of how talented they are. Same with Austin Eckler. But I would look at the other guys in that offense and probably not start them, just because the Patriots are going to look to take away anything that could have a little bit of success to, make sure that this game is, closer than it should be. So I would say take Jared Cook out of here. Even though he's been a viable streamer in most leagues, the Patriots have only allowed one tight end to score double-digit points, and that was Dalton Schultz from the Cowboys. And I think it was because he got a touchdown. So wouldn't start Jared Cook. So those are the starts and sits of the week. Drop your fantasy questions below. With the trade deadline approaching, obviously, probably a lot of trade deadlines in fantasy coming up soon as well. So if you need trade advice on anything, drop it in the comments or follow us on Instagram, where we can answer there too.
Yeah. So that is the starts and sits for week 8. It was good to be, back. We took only one episode break. There's a little void there in my heart. I'm glad we figured everything out. Managed to makeshift podcast per se. But that is the week 8 picks and the week 8 starts and sits. Like John mentioned, our Instagram is actually above John now. I switched this around, John, because now I'm looking left. It just looks better. And our Twitter and TikTok are above me at Shut Up and Ball. And we do have a Facebook page, which is just Shut Up and Ball. Like John mentioned, comment, subscribe. That is all free, and feel free to give us any feedback. I don't be the obvious. Obviously, we're gonna get John's camera situation resolved, and so we'll figure that all out. But otherwise, enjoy your week 8. I am kind of, sort of, not really right now watching this Packer game. It's not as bad as I expected, but we'll see. But regardless, enjoy your weekend and enjoy your Halloween. Be safe and such and all that. It sucks it's on a Sunday. Why is Halloween always not on a weekend day? It always sucks. That's why I hated Halloween, by the way. And if my parents were watching, they'd probably be super shy. I just didn't like Halloween because it was always on a school night. And I'm like, what's the point? We're going to do all this stuff and I'll be super tired tomorrow. And I just don't like costume stuff in general. So anyways, have a fun, safe Halloween, everyone. Or if you don't celebrate that, then just have a good weekend. So other than that,